In this video, you will learn social surplus and deadweight loss. The first part of social surplus that we will learn is consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is going to be looking at the buying side. And for us to figure out or calculate it, we take the maximum willingness to pay, or the maximum willing price, and subtract it by our equilibrium price. So this is going to be looking at the buyer's side. And it's the idea that if I walk into a store and I think that I'm going to have to pay $10 for the item, and then when I walk in and find out I only have to pay $7 because it's on sale, then I have an extra consumer surplus of $3. That extra $3 that stays in my pocket. The producer surplus looks at the seller's side. To calculate producer surplus, we flip it around a little bit, start off with the equilibrium price, and then subtract our minimum acceptable price. And the idea is that if I'm a farmer, I come to market and I'm willing to sell my corn for $1, and then I find out that I get to sell it for $2 each, then I have additional surplus in my happiness because I am making even more money for the same amount of work. When we add both consumer surplus and producer surplus together, that's how we get social surplus. You may have heard this referred to as total surplus in other textbooks. And then if we have something that is changing the market equilibrium, say a price ceiling or a price floor, this can create deadweight loss, which is a reduction in consumer and or producer surpluses. So let's see what it looks like on a graph. Let's first find our equilibrium at point E. We see we have price equilibrium at $80 and equilibrium quantity at $28. So let's find our consumer surplus first. The top part of the demand line, until it gets to equilibrium, this is giving us that maximum willing price. That tells us for each good that is being purchased here, that is being demanded, there is some discrepancy between the maximum willing price and the price actually paid. So for example, for the first 10 quantity, the demanders were willing to pay $100 or even more. If we look at the earlier quantities, they were willing to pay even higher prices. And so for us to capture this at a price of 120, we find the consumer surplus equal to that maximum willing price and then subtract it from the equilibrium price of 80. And so we know on that 10th unit, the demander experienced a consumer surplus equal to $40. For us to find the total consumer surplus, we just fill in this triangle. And this entire triangle here becomes our consumer surplus. Now let's look at the producer surplus. The entire supply line up from the bottom up until it hits equilibrium, that's giving us our minimum acceptable price. And so, for example, if we look at the 14th quantity, we go up and we see that let's call this $45. Minimum acceptable price at 14 is $45. And then we go up and we know that they are going to be selling it for $80. For us to calculate the producer surplus, we take equilibrium price at 80, subtract the minimum acceptable price of 45, and we're left with $35 in producer surplus. If we were to find the total producer surplus, we just look at this cover in the entire triangle between equilibrium price and the supply line. So let's jump over here, redraw these so we can get a cleaner view. So this here being our producer surplus. And then above we have consumer surplus. If we were to include both of them, that is our total surplus or social surplus. At equilibrium, we are going to maximize our total surplus. If we have a price that is caused to be other than the equilibrium, that's where we can start to get deadweight loss. And in these examples, I'll be able to show you which causes which. So we start off, have an equilibrium price of 600, equilibrium quantity of 20,000, and then we have a total surplus or social surplus of T, U, V, W, and X. Now, if we introduce a price ceiling, remember price ceiling means we come up, we try to increase price, but then we get stopped. Then we come over to supply line first. So we know that this is a quantity supplied. And then we keep coming over and we get the quantity demanded, which is much larger. So we know there's going to be a shortage. And we also know that now, if we cut this off, U and W are going to become deadweight loss because X is our new producer surplus, and then T and V become our new consumer surplus. That leaves us with U and W becomes our deadweight loss. Because before, when we had the equilibrium price at 600, our overall total surplus and social surplus was T, V, X, U, and W. But then once we have the price ceiling, consumer surplus gets larger at producer surplus getting smaller. And then we also lose the surpluses of U and W. Over here on the right, we have the price floor. First, find the equilibrium price at $8 and equilibrium quantity at 1,800. That gives us an original social surplus of G, H, I, J, and K. So our original social surplus is G plus H plus I plus K. And our social surplus is G plus H plus J. Producer surplus is equal to I plus K. But if we have a price floor, price will try to decrease, but then get stopped at 12. We come over. The first line we hit is the demand line. Come down. We already see quantity demanded is the smaller of the two because this is going to create a surplus. We see that afterwards, consumer surplus is only equal to G. And then we notice that here we go. That color goes with that color. And then we have our producer surplus of H and I. And then we lose J and K. So both price ceilings and price floors can cause deadweight loss, where now our overall social surplus, for example, would only constitute G plus H plus I. And that is social surplus and deadweight loss.